The galaxy was a big, beautiful place. Too beautiful, perhaps, for its own good. And it was exactly that beauty that made humans such perfect targets. No one in the universe could resist the appeal of hunting them down for sport. They were weak, unorganized, and frankly, too soft for the harsh realities of the galaxy. No matter where they went, there was always an assassin lurking nearby, waiting for the right moment to strike. The kind of killer who considered the task a day at the office, the galaxy's own merciless version of a cat playing with a mouse before the kill. The assassins weren't your run-of-the-mill bounty hunters either. They were a finely tuned, highly efficient killing machine. Equipped with advanced weaponry, cybernetic enhancements, and decades of experience in exterminating all things human, they were as cold-blooded as they came. Each assassin came from a different species, different corner of the galaxy, but they all shared one thing in common: humans were the perfect prey. Of course, humanity, being its stubborn self, wasn't going to take this lying down. At least not at first. A few decades ago, humanity tried to strike a deal with the Galactic Council to intervene and stop the killings, but that just ended with humans being told to adapt or perish. And so they did. They adapted, but poorly. They started arming themselves, building secret weapons, organizing anti-assassin factions, but it was all futile. The assassins always seemed to be one step ahead. Each assassination more brutal than the last. Each failure more humiliating. Even the best minds on Earth couldn't come up with a solution. The only thing left was to beg. And beg they did, reaching out to anyone who might help them in their hour of need. But help was expensive. No one was interested in saving a race of people whose only skill seemed to be getting themselves killed. That was until a small, obscure bounty hunting agency on the edge of the galaxy took notice of the humans' desperation. They didn't care about the politics or the money. No, they were looking for something more satisfying. Something personal. Enter the Dillons, two of the most infamous and downright reckless bounty hunters ever to grace the galaxy's underworld. A retired couple of Earth's finest who, after years of galactic carnage, had more or less given up on taking jobs. They'd seen too much bloodshed, fought too many battles, and grown weary of the endless cycle of killing and money. They just wanted to kick back and enjoy the simpler things in life, like their 2 cats and the occasional glass of whiskey. But the problem with being a legendary pair of bounty hunters is that you're always in demand. And when the humans called, they had no choice but to answer. Mostly because they were bored. And the humans promised to throw in some free therapy sessions if they helped out. There were worse things in the universe than dealing with homicidal assassins, after all. The moment the Dillons walked into the Council's secret briefing room, the air changed. It wasn't just that they were older than any of the assassins or that they were wearing ridiculously oversized coats like they just walked out of a 21st century fashion disaster. No, what stood out the most was their utter indifference. They weren't fazed by the piles of dead bodies or the sobbing council members. They weren't even interested in the money. They just looked at the problem, how to stop galactic assassins, and smiled. "Here's the deal," said Ray Dillon, the male of the pair, leaning back in his chair like he was about to settle in for a Sunday afternoon nap. He was an imposing figure with salt and pepper hair, a grizzled beard, and a scar that ran from his ear down to his collarbone. "You want these assassins dead? We'll do it, but there's gonna be some conditions." One of the council members, a slimy-looking reptilian with glowing yellow eyes, practically jumped out of his chair. "Conditions? What conditions? We're offering you a small fortune and you—" Ray cut him off, raising his hand. "Yeah, we've heard it all before. But we don't work for just credits, pal. We need free reign. Complete autonomy. And no one gets to tell us how to do our job." "Done," the reptilian blurted out, desperate for a solution. Ray turned to his wife, Lila, sitting next to him, looking completely disinterested in the entire conversation. She was more concerned with her nails than any Galactic Council drama. After a few moments of silence, Ray turned back to the council. "Oh, and one more thing." The reptilian's eye twitched nervously. "What is it?" Ray smirked. "We'll need a base of operations. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere nice. And somewhere we can relax after the job's done. Lila finally looked up, a little spark of amusement in her eyes. Somewhere with a pool. Fine. The reptilian gasped. Whatever. Just please, do something. And so, the Dillons were back in business. The job, however, wasn't quite what they expected. The assassins were like nothing they'd ever encountered. Sleek, technologically advanced, and terrifying in every sense of the word. But none of that mattered to Ray and Lila. They were just happy to be working again, even if the whole thing felt like a bizarre vacation, except for the fact that there were highly trained killers hunting humans across the galaxy. The first assassin they tracked down was a being called Track, a hulking creature with multiple arms, each holding a different weapon. He was tall, scarred, and nearly invincible, or so he thought. Ray and Lila found him lounging on a beach planet, sipping a coconut drink with an umbrella. It didn't take long for the couple to turn the situation into a chaotic, slapstick chase. Come on, Track! Ray yelled as he tackled the assassin into a pile of sand. You've been hunting humans for too long. It's time to go to bed. Lila, still more concerned with her hair than the actual confrontation, tossed the grenade at Track's feet. It exploded with a dramatic flare, sending the assassin flying across the beach, where he collided with a group of unsuspecting tourists. You know, Lila said, dusting off her hands, for a guy who's supposed to be a badass, he sure goes down easily. Ray laughed, grabbing a nearby towel and slinging it over his shoulder. Well, that's what happens when you underestimate us, sweetheart. And thus began the Dillons' glorious return to the assassin hunting business. They didn't care about the politics, they didn't care about the money, and they certainly didn't care about the galaxy's opinion of them. They were here to do one thing and one thing only: kill, but with style, wit, and a lot of damn humor. The galaxy's assassins didn't know it yet, but their days were numbered. Ray and Lila Dillon had been unleashed, and they weren't going down without a fight. Well, more like a brawl, a slapstick chase, and a whole lot of really, really bad puns. And as for humanity? They were still trying to figure out how to survive. But at least they had one thing going for them now. The galaxy's deadliest assassins were now officially the second deadliest force in the galaxy. The Dillons were back. The last time anyone had seen or heard of the legendary bounty hunter couple was over 50 years ago. Back then, they were famous for turning the tide in a war that wasn't even their own. They'd wiped out entire fleets, taken down armies, and made enemies tremble. But all that glory faded, and they faded with it. Retired. Now, they lived in a small, barely noticeable corner of a space station, far from the chaos of galactic politics and assassination contracts. Their days of heroism were long gone, replaced by mundane arguments over whose turn it was to do the dishes or take out the space trash. A retired bounty hunter's life wasn't glamorous, at least, not anymore. And that was exactly the problem. Humanity had been dealing with galactic assassins for years, and each time one of their colonies was wiped out, their hope dwindled a little further. The galaxy was a tough place, and humanity's place in it was small, fragile. When the galaxy's deadliest assassins, a collection of aliens who had been hired to take out the last remaining pockets of human resistance, got to work, humanity's situation went from bad to worse. No one was left to stand in the way. No military, no government, no one. Then, one desperate survivor, who happened to be a former associate of the couple, found them. He tracked them down through every hidden corner of the galaxy, through back channels and old contacts. He knew they were the only hope left. The bounty hunter couple, now living as has-beens, would be humanity's last and only shot at survival. They were the galaxy's great forgotten heroes, living a life that couldn't be more different from their glorious past. But their skills? Oh, those were still razor sharp. Look, I'm not saying you two are old, but you're certainly not young anymore, the desperate human said, pacing around the small, cluttered room that had become their retirement home. He was sweaty, frantic, and clearly out of his depth. The male bounty hunter, a grizzled man with a cybernetic arm and a gruff voice, grunted from his recliner. You're gonna have to be more specific than that, kid. What do you need? Humanity's getting slaughtered. And no one's left to stop it. The assassins, they're wiping out every last human colony. You two are the only ones who can do this. The survivor's eyes locked with the bounty hunters. Please, you have to come back. We need you. The bounty hunter's wife, who had been half-heartedly knitting a scarf, for what reason, no one really knew, didn't look up. She hadn't been this disengaged in years. The trauma of their past battles, the endless bloodshed, and their so-called heroism had left her tired. Too tired to care anymore. You want us to go back to that? She asked, her voice dripping with sarcasm. The blood, the killing, the death? We've been there, done that. I'm not going to throw away what little peace we have left. You can't mean that, the survivor insisted. You two were the best. You could. The male bounty hunter cut him off with a wave of his hand. Yeah, we were the best. And it nearly killed us. We retired for a reason. Humans need you, the survivor said, his voice desperate. The galaxy needs you. It's not just about fighting for survival anymore. You two can save them. You can make a difference. The bounty hunter wife finally put down her knitting and sighed. All right, let's say we do it. We're getting too old for this, but we'll bite. What exactly do you have in mind? The survivor's eyes lit up, relieved that they weren't going to shoot him out the airlock just yet. A plan. It's a long shot, but it's all we've got. I've got the intel on the assassins. Their weaknesses, their movements. We'll track them down, one by one. You two can handle that, right? The male bounty hunter glanced at his wife. She rolled her eyes but didn't say anything. Her silence was all the confirmation he needed. All right, he said, standing up and stretching. Let's get to work. The survivor blinked, confused. That's it? Just like that? Well, what else are we gonna do? The bounty hunter grinned, revealing a row of sharp teeth. We're retired, but we've still got some tricks up our sleeves. Let's show these assassins what happens when they mess with the wrong species. The female bounty hunter stood up too, adjusting her now wrinkled shirt. I've been waiting for something to get me out of this boring mess, so why not this? She cracked her knuckles and pulled out her blaster. Just tell me who to shoot first. They weren't heroes anymore. Not in the way they had been in their youth. But one thing was certain, they weren't done. Not by a long shot. The bounty hunters went to work. It wasn't pretty. They hadn't fought in years, but they still had the instincts. The survivor gave them the intel, and they got their hands dirty. Their first target was an assassin who had been slaughtering humans on a nearby colony, a stealthy, humanoid alien who could blend into the shadows and take down entire cities in a single night. The bounty hunters didn't play by the rules. They didn't need to. Their approach wasn't exactly subtle. The bounty hunter wife rigged a trap, setting up a decoy and luring the assassin into an ambush. The male bounty hunter handled the final strike, delivering it with the kind of cold precision only a seasoned professional could muster. It wasn't easy, but it was effective. The next few days were filled with chaos, strategy, and a whole lot of laughs. The bounty hunter couple got back into the swing of things, no longer the celebrated heroes of their youth, but still deadly as ever. And as they eliminated one assassin after another, they realized something that should have been obvious from the start. They weren't just doing this for humanity. They were doing it because they were good at it. They were the best, and it felt damn good to be back in the game. As they moved from mission to mission, taking down assassins like it was second nature, their relationship grew stronger. They didn't need to talk about it, but it was clear. The rush of the hunt, the thrill of the kill, brought them closer than they had been in years. There were jokes, playful arguments, and that trademark dark humor that only a pair of bounty hunters could understand. They may have been retired, but they were still alive. And in a galaxy full of assassins, that was more than most could say. It was the kind of day that made you wish the universe would just end already, but of course, it never did. A desperate council of human leaders, on the brink of surrendering to the galaxy's most notorious assassins, decided that they needed to do something radical, something that had no chance of working but was worth a shot. They needed to find the retired bounty hunter couple. Unfortunately, no one knew exactly where they were. They'd gone off-grid decades ago, and the universe had pretty much written them off as old news. But the Council was out of options. The assassins had already slaughtered 3 of humanity's largest colonies. Soon Earth itself would be on the chopping block. So, in a last-ditch effort to salvage their species, the Council threw together a haphazard mission to track down these relics of the past. The hunt wasn't easy. The bounty hunters were notorious for being untraceable, having vanished off the grid the moment their retirement had begun. No communication, no data trails, just ghost-like silence. But the Council had one advantage that none of the assassins could foresee: they had the time, and they had the desperation. They put out the call. It was a long shot, but they didn't care anymore. It wasn't long before a group of bounty hunters came in. These were no galactic assassins, of course, but regular mercenaries who were just a bit too cocky for their own good. They had been hired to track down the legendary couple, though no one knew where to begin looking. What they didn't know was that the bounty hunter couple was already watching them from a dark corner of the station. And this time, they weren't in the mood for playing nice. The bounty hunters had been expecting to find a pair of frail, old individuals, maybe a little bit senile, still living off past glory. Instead, they found a pair of sharp-eyed, ruggedly fit individuals who were more than capable of turning their own weapons against them. The couple was living out their retirement in a kind of blissful mediocrity. But the moment they heard that someone was coming after them, all those old skills and tendencies kicked back into action. They didn't need to hear the full pitch from the humans. They didn't need to hear about their tragic losses or imminent extinction. The idea of being pulled back into the game was enough. They went to work quickly, and hilariously. The couple's methods weren't refined. They were messy, loud, and absolutely chaotic. The bounty hunters learned the hard way that this wasn't some quiet operation where you'd sneak in and out without a trace. This was a comedy of errors, with the husband getting his leg caught in an air vent, the wife accidentally triggering a fire alarm, and the entire crew of mercenaries stumbling through a series of increasingly ridiculous and humiliating situations. The couple was no longer the cold-blooded killing machines they used to be, but they were still the most dangerous pair of retirees in the galaxy. As the situation escalated, the mercenaries soon realized they weren't just outmatched by 2 aging ex-assassins, they were completely outclassed. Every time they thought they had the upper hand, the couple pulled off a move so ridiculous, so absurd, it left them speechless. The husband, after accidentally setting off a smoke grenade, found himself locked in a laundry closet with a half-dead mercenary. The wife, on the other hand, took out the rest of the crew by hiding in plain sight, waiting for them to knock each other out before coming in and delivering the final blow. The whole operation was more slapstick comedy than tactical warfare. But the job got done. At some point during the chaos, one of the mercenaries realized that this entire mission was doomed from the start. The Council had been too desperate, too eager to find anyone, to stop the assassins. They didn't realize that these 2 were too old, too eccentric, and too, well, offbeat to do the job like anyone else would. They weren't out to save humanity for the right reasons. They just liked the idea of having a purpose again, even if it was the most ridiculous, messiest job they could have taken. And then it hit them: the bounty hunter couple weren't heroes. They were simply bored. And boredom was an even scarier weapon than any assassin's blade. The mercenaries left with their tails between their legs, the situation thoroughly handled by the couple who were just as likely to knock over a lamp while attempting to kill someone as they were to succeed. The first real kill of the mission happened when the husband, completely out of shape and mid-walk, tripped on a power cord, causing a heavy object to fall on an assassin's head. He meant to do something cooler, but honestly, this was more than enough. The Council, although somewhat perplexed by the complete unorthodox style of the couple, saw only one thing: the human race had just been saved, by 2 people who were much more likely to fight over which restaurant to go to than actually do anything useful. It was a win, sure. But it was also an entire galaxy's nightmare wrapped in an absurd comedic package. And the real punchline? The bounty hunter couple didn't even care. They didn't feel any sense of heroism, no grand speeches, no dramatic monologues. They were just happy they didn't have to do the dishes that night. By the time the council managed to locate the retired couple, they had already fallen back into their routine of bickering over things like the correct way to organize a weapons locker or who had left the air filtration system on, extra cold, last night. It wasn't glamorous, but it was familiar. They had given up on anything resembling a heroic return to action long ago. That was until a ragtag group of desperate diplomats and politicians knocked on their door, begging them to come out of retirement. The couple wasn't interested at first. They had no stake in this war. No loyalty to the rest of humanity. They had killed for decades. At the height of their career, they had been the most feared bounty hunters in the galaxy. But that was ancient history. They had done their part. The only thing they wanted now was peace. And maybe a little privacy, too. But the politicians had come prepared. Not with money. Not with promises. No, they had something far more valuable. A working kitchen appliance. A rare relic from their past. It was an espresso machine, one that the wife had had her eye on for years. They had tracked it down, painstakingly, as part of their desperate negotiation. The husband saw the machine, looked at his wife, and without a word, agreed to the deal. They'd come out of retirement. It wasn't a noble cause. It wasn't a sense of duty or justice. It was the coffee. The politicians didn't know it, but they had just triggered the most dangerous and hilariously dysfunctional duo in galactic history. The couple agreed to the job with one condition: they could take as many breaks as they wanted, and they would be allowed to watch old Earth sitcoms in between missions. The politicians, desperate and naive, agreed without hesitation. Within hours, the bounty hunters were back in action. Only this time, things were different. They weren't the polished, methodical killers of their youth. They were older, slower, and, most importantly, had developed a very unhealthy relationship with comfort. But they were still effective. After all, you don't spend decades in the business without picking up a few tricks along the way. The couple's first mission was a disaster. They accidentally showed up at the wrong location, mistaken for another bounty hunter team who'd been hired for a different contract. A group of would-be assassins, dressed in full body armor, greeted them with suspicion. The husband, not missing a beat, shot one of them in the foot with a tranquilizer dart, claiming it was a warning shot. The wife, casually tossing her weapon aside, began negotiating for better terms, mostly about the quality of snacks available in the area. Eventually, the situation devolved into a mix of bickering, misunderstandings, and accidental injuries. But through all the chaos, they somehow managed to take down their target, an infamous assassin who had been hunting humans for years. They didn't do it with fancy moves or slick tactics. They did it with sheer stubbornness, a little luck, and a lot of sarcastic remarks about how the galaxy had gone to hell since they retired. They didn't even get paid in credits. They got paid in antique human wine and a gift card to a space diner. But that was enough. In that moment, it was clear. They were back. The assassin duo that had once struck fear into the hearts of entire species was alive, well, and clearly more interested in comfort than combat. But still, there was something in the way they worked together, bickered with each other, and yet somehow made everything work that made the galaxy's assassins tremble. The political leaders didn't know whether to laugh or cry as the couple swaggered out of the mission site, leaving a trail of chaos behind them. But they had succeeded. The humans were safe, at least for now. The assassins, on the other hand, didn't know what hit them. They had underestimated humanity, yet again. But this time, humanity wasn't alone. It had its most dysfunctional, irritable, and surprisingly effective bounty hunters back in the game. As the couple sat down in their dingy apartment, drinking coffee and watching reruns of old Earth sitcoms, they couldn't help but laugh. It wasn't the most heroic thing they had ever done, but it was probably one of the most fun. And for a couple of retired bounty hunters who had long given up on any kind of glory, that was more than enough. And so, the galaxy would go on. The assassins would eventually regroup, but they would know one thing for sure: humans might be easy targets, but there were a couple of them out there who had been underestimated one too many times. The bounty hunter couple was back in business, and the galaxy wasn't ready for what was coming next. But for now, they had coffee. And that was all that mattered.